Jeff Buehner, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast today. How you doing?
Thank you, Adam, for having me.
No, you're most welcome. You're most welcome. And yeah, that's really great to have you on my podcast. And I'll introduce you because you basically have like around 20 plus years of coaching experience and helping people. And I see you're the author as well of is it Sultan's Seven Secrets. Is that right?
Correct.
And I actually listened to some of your audiobook earlier and I really liked it. And do you want to kind of go into like your background, how you kind of got into what you do, what your book is about?
Sure. Yeah, I wrote the book. Well, let me tell you how I came to know what I know and what I teach. I only teach one thing, and it's what's in the book. But at the age of 33, I was a concrete contractor and just so frustrated with just not being able to provide the kind of life I wanted to for my family. I felt so trapped. I was working so hard and going in reverse a little bit every year, it felt like. And one day I did something that I knew I wasn't supposed to do. I unloaded my problems on a complete stranger. This beautiful, elegant woman that we were doing all kinds of concrete work for in her backyard. She had this beautiful home. She was beautiful, even though she was elderly. Her husband was a stud. They just seemed to have the life I wanted and couldn't get. And she was so nice that this is the thing I did that I knew I wasn't supposed to. I complained and just told her all of my problems. I just said, this is what I want, but there's no way in the world I could get it. And right in the middle of that complaining, she turned around and left. And I was so embarrassed. But a few minutes later, she came back and placed a manuscript in my hands. And I didn't know it at the time, but that was the answer to the better life that I was looking for. But the funny thing, Adam, I wasn't even going to read it. I was so busy. I thought, lady, there's no chance on earth I have time to read your paper, But I put it by the nightstand, and that night I happened to read the first page while I was waiting for my wife to come to bed. And then I stayed up the whole night making notes and reading this manuscript. Now, I probably ought to tell you what's in the manuscript, right?
Yeah.
So, because that changed my life absolutely. It's never been the same since reading that. The manuscript tells the story of a real man in history, Sultan Musa of Mali. Now, this is the richest guy to ever walk the earth. No one's come close to this guy, not Elon Musk, not Jeff Bezos, nobody. And yet, very few people know about him. He was not born the son of a sultan. In fact, his own father died when he was very young, which condemned him and his mother to extreme poverty. He had to steal food every day just to survive. Well, at the age of 12, Musa falls in with an older thief who then tries to murder him rather than split the goods with him. And Musa survives this murder attempt, but he has what we call a near-death experience in which he met a man made of light and love. And in this experience, this man made of light taught him how the world works, basically, how creation works, how you work. And in this manuscript, there's something that he refers to called the language of the gods. And he says, when you speak this language, the world obeys your commands. Now, that sounds really weird, but I read it, and the second I read it, I knew that what he was teaching was true. It was like, oh yeah, that's the way it works. Why didn't I see that before? Well, the language of the gods, where does it sounds, is so simple, but it changed my life. Adam, I didn't even dare for a while play with it. I didn't dare do it because when I read this manuscript, I was so filled with hope and excitement like I'd never felt in my life. And I thought, if I do this and it doesn't work, I'm going to go kill myself. I'm going to be so depressed because this is the first thing I'd ever read that really showed me the way to having what I wanted out of life. Finally, I got up the courage, though, and I started messing around with it. And as I spoke the language of the gods regarding kind of some unimportant things, little things, really weird coincidences started popping up. And at some point, I had to admit, that thing that happened yesterday was not happening a month ago, certainly not a year ago. And it matches exactly the language of the gods I've been speaking in that regard. So then I started doing it a little more seriously, and more coincidences started popping up. And then at some point, I just went crazy on it. I just went nuts. I was speaking it all day long, every day, and my life changed very, very rapidly. In fact, it kind of freaked everybody out that knew me. I was a small town guy, concrete contractor, rode in the rodeos, and then everything changed. I went from being a $60,000 a year concrete contractor to making at least 3 times that much every month. And, I resisted really changing my lifestyle too much too fast. But of course, within a little while, I bought a Mercedes and got a new home, and it freaked people out. And then I had a steady stream of people knocking on my door that wanted to know how I did that. Well, I got to go back to this Musa, Sultan Musa of Mali, because what the man made of light taught him, those principles are what he used to lift himself out of poverty. But he wasn't just really, really wealthy. He was famously generous. He was so kind and loving. His relationship with his wife is like legendary. But he couldn't talk about directly how he learned what he learned to become so wealthy, and yet he wanted everybody to know how to do what he knew how to do. So he embedded the secrets to his success, what he learned from the man made of light, about how it works, how he works, in a fairy tale so compelling that centuries later, almost everyone on earth is familiar with it. And that's Aladdin and the Magic Lamp. Sultan Musa of Mali is the author of that. But he wrote a second parchment. And that second parchment, well, the fairy tale, of course, he shared with anybody who, would listen, and then he would try to teach them some principles. And you might ask, well, wait a minute, why did he have to write a second parchment? Why did he write the fairy tale? Why not just come out with it? Tell everybody. But think of this, in the 1300s in West Africa, in fact, 200 years ago, you couldn't just come out and say, hey, I died yesterday, but then I came back to life and I met God and he taught me how the world works. Taught me things that even our most, our highest scholars have no idea of. Now, that's an easy way to get yourself killed. And he knew that. So to preserve his life, but still try to get the message out, he wrote that fairy tale. Now, the fairy tale has 4 main elements. Aladdin is the conscious mind. That's what you think of as you. When you wake up in the morning and start thinking, you think, well, this is Adam. All right, so there's Aladdin. But then there's this all-powerful genie who can get you anything you want, but you have to talk to it a certain way. You have to summons it a certain way. And here comes the magic lamp. This is the thing that changes everything for Aladdin, which is basically a metaphor for Musa's own life. Well, the second parchment details who Aladdin is, who the genie is, and what the magic lamp represents. And it represents something called the language of the gods. So the genie is what Musa referred to as the veiled mind. We call it the subconscious mind. We're familiar with this concept. The subconscious mind is way more powerful than we have really any idea, even though we think it's powerful. But it is literally tied in, connected to all wisdom, all knowledge, other people's subconscious minds, and it's connected to God. It has the power to do anything, but it only shares the wisdom and knowledge with you, the conscious mind, that supports the current role you're playing. And you choose that role. You decide what role you're playing. And that's all any of us are doing. It's what you're doing. It's what I'm doing. I'm playing the role of Jeff Buehner. Well, you can change your role anytime you want to by simply dreaming up a new role and then in the language of the gods communicating your desires to your subconscious mind. Well, so what's the language of the gods? I mean, my subconscious mind obviously knows what I want, right? Why isn't it telling me how to get there? If Jeff Buehner is saying that it already knows the $1 million idea that would work for somebody who's really struggling and having a hard time financially, subconscious mind's got to know that. Why won't it give it up? Because you're not speaking the language it responds to. So here's the thing. It could care less about the words that come out of your mouth. It doesn't listen to those. It knows what you're saying, but it doesn't obey your words. It's not programmed by your words. Same thing with your thoughts. Your thoughts can be so scattered that you can't even keep them straight. And it doesn't listen to those. It just ignores them in terms of obeying them. It obeys a much more primitive and much more reliable mechanism. And that's your feelings. Your feelings are always true. They may not be helpful, they may not be productive, but the reason he called it the language of the gods is that when he met the man made of light, he didn't have to tell the man made of light who he was, nor did the man made of light need to tell him anything. Your feelings emanate. And on the other side, in a spiritual realm, they're out there for everyone to see. You can't hide them, and you can't BS anybody about them. It's just there they are. How do you feel about your fellow man, for example? Well, there it is. How do you feel about yourself? How do you feel about everything? It's all on display. So your subconscious mind hears, believes, and obeys your feelings. Feelings is the language of the gods. It's the magic lamp. This understanding really is the magic lamp. That you tell your subconscious mind what to believe in the language of feelings, or what role you're playing, if you will. It believes those feelings, and whatever it believes, Adam, this is the thing that you can take to the bank. Whatever it believes to be true about you and the role you're playing, it makes true in your physical realm. And this is so easy to see in other people. You know, if you know somebody who's always a little bummed out and a little depressed, not clinically, just their attitude, they're a downer. Well, they come into a room and people treat them differently than they treat the guy that comes in all pumped up and excited and happy and slapping everyone on the back. And you can see how feelings are a self-fulfilling prophecy. That guy feels down. If someone says hi to him, you're going, what's so great about life? And then, because nobody really wants to hang out with him at the party, he goes home, and that supports his subconscious belief that he doesn't do well with people. People don't like him. People aren't kind. People aren't nice. No one talked to him at the party. But he's the one who told everyone in their subconscious feeling center that, it wouldn't be any fun to talk to that guy tonight. Feelings are a self-fulfilling prophecy. So in my book, I explain how when you change the way you speak to your subconscious mind in the language of feelings, it responds. If we're talking about us playing a role and we think of ourselves as actors on a stage, then think of your subconscious mind as a really good stage manager. He's got access to all the props, everything. But he only puts on the stage what supports the role he thinks you're playing. And you're the one that tells him that role every day, every minute in the language of feelings. So remember in the metaphor, for Moose's own life, the genie, the all-powerful genie, only says two things. One is a question. What is wanted? What do you want? The other is a statement. Your wish is my command. So it's always asking. Your subconscious mind is always asking. It's asking right now, what do you want? And you're answering in the language of feelings. And so however you're feeling about your relationship, your finances, your career opportunities, your health, your fitness, what's possible for you in life, you're telling your subconscious mind, who says, okay, I'll go make sure that's the way it is. So the trick is to substantially change the way you feel about any aspect of your life that you want to change. Simply stop feeling bad about it and start feeling good. Well, how do you do that if, for example, you have a terrible social life? Nobody likes you. You don't have any friends, and you're really clumsy around people. So how do you start feeling good about your social life or your finances? If you don't have any money, you fail at everything you touch. All right, this brings us to your superpower. This is how you've learned everything that you've learned up to now and how you'll learn everything in the future. It's how everything was invented, from a paper plate to your cell phone. This is your ability to imagine and pretend. See, again, we think of us as like, Jeff is Jeff. Jeff can be relied on to be Jeff. And we even say things like, hey, Adam, quit acting like somebody else. Just be you, right? There is no you. There is no you. It's an invented role. And you can reinvent it and redesign it anytime you want to. How do you use pretending to do that? I'm going to give you one little example. Let's say that you're a horrible driver. You get so enraged when you're on the road. You're a road warrior. And you just know people are going to try to cut you off. And when you try to get in, they hit the gas and close the gap and don't let you in. And you just really get so upset that you decide one day, I've had enough altercations on the road that I'm going to change. Well, what are you going to change to? Somebody you conceive is a good driver, someone who doesn't have those altercations. And so maybe you think of your grandpa, Adam Sr., and you think, I'm going to pretend to be grandpa just for 5 minutes, for the 5 minutes it takes me to go to the store, and then maybe 5 minutes more on the way back. I'm going to pretend to be grandpa, and I'm going to drive the way, my subconscious mind knows grandpa has a really good idea of how grandpa drives. And so you pretend to be grandpa. Now here comes somebody and they're about to cut you off. You're pretending to be grandpa, so you do what he would do and you just back up and let him in and then wave at him. And now when you go to get over and you think, somebody might try to cut me off, so I'm not even going to let them know. I'm not even going to put on my blinker. I'm just going to jump in there. But now you're grandpa. So you slow down, you put on your blinker, you look, you wait, you realize, oh, somebody is letting me in. You go in, you wave in the back window. Well, you know that you can pretend to be anybody. You can pretend to be grandpa. You can pretend to be a good driver. And what if you string together a whole day of doing that, and maybe a week and then a month of pretending to be a good driver? Well, at some point, you're not pretending anymore. You just simply are a good driver. You can apply this to anything in your life, but it's more than just decide what you want to be, then design that, map it out, describe it, and then kind of start pretending to be that, or pretending that that's the way life is. Now, the reason there's a magical element to this is because as you clumsily try to pretend to have and be and experience what you really want out of life, you're experiencing part of the feelings that you're going to feel when you actually have it. That's what pretending is. But here's the thing, your subconscious mind listens to feelings. And as you produce those feelings, it hears them and believes them. And if you do enough of it, it believes that things need to happen that will incorporate more of those feelings into your life. And then it goes out with power and precision and access. And the next thing you know, a great idea comes to you from seemingly nowhere, like out there, or you have an interaction, you meet someone, and they have the second half of a great business idea that you have the first half of. And the next thing you know, the two of you together, you're off and running. So pretending is how you generate the right feelings in the face of, in defiance of what's going on in your physical realm. Now, I want you to think about this. When you create an imaginary scenario of something really wonderful happening, you know it's not real, right? But what about the feelings that that scenario generates when you get lost in a beautiful daydream of being in love, or having $10 million in the bank, or whatever it is? Are the feelings that are generated by that daydream real? You better believe it. And your subconscious mind is listening. So everything I teach is, once I teach these basic concepts of how creation works, how the world works, and how powerful your subconscious mind is, everything from that point on is, how do you seize control of how and what you're feeling, even though stuff in your physical realm is tapping you on the shoulder and trying to make you feel bad? If the whole trick is to feel good, How do you avoid feeling bad when you're constantly bombarded with reasons to feel bad? And that's where it gets fun. That's where I have people come to workshops. We delve right into it, but we create triggers and we create imaginary scenarios that are tailor-made to a specific outcome. So they have to be quick. You got to be able to do them like very quickly, build them fast. They have to be super powerful. You have to be able to feel a little intensity. And then you have to be able to hold that scenario, which is easy to do because it's fun and intensely pleasurable. But you have to hold that scenario for about 60 seconds at a time. In the beginning, and we call these spell breakers. And the reason I call them spell breakers is just because people are kind of living in a spell. And I call it, that spell is basically you wake up every morning thinking the same old habitual thoughts. You're thinking about your life. You're thinking about what's not right. Those thoughts create habitual feelings about your every aspect of your life. And then your subconscious mind hears and believes those feelings and then keeps your life congruent with them. So around and around you go. And that's what I call the spell you're under. To break that spell, you have to throw a monkey wrench into the works. And that monkey wrench is a spell breaker. It's an intense imaginary scenario that doesn't help you feel better. It just makes you feel better instantly when you go into that place of imagining a certain thing happening. You feel better. Like that's what you now feel differently, and you're speaking different words in the language of the gods to your all-powerful genie, who, if you do enough of it, believes it. And once it believes something, it has to make it true in your physical realm. So here's how I describe this typically. Your life is congruent, and your subconscious mind cares about congruency. It's all about that. And it keeps what's going on the stage of your life congruent with your predominant feelings. And like we said, with the little example of the guy who, is down and depressed and bummed out and not very happy, when he walks into a room, he gets results that keep his life congruent with what he's telling his subconscious mind in the language of feelings. So when you start creating and speaking vastly different feelings that are not congruent with your reality, you create this gap. Well, your subconscious mind can't endure that gap. It can't stand it. It must close it. And the first thing it's going to try to do is send you a whole bunch of reminders that, hey, wait a minute, that's not reality for you. This is. So come on back. But if you ignore those and you persist in using your superpower to pretend and imagine scenarios that make you feel differently, incongruent with your reality, at some point it will give up trying to get you to come back, and it will simply close that gap by changing your reality. Now, people think, could I do that? Is that something that really happens? Is that really how it works? You see it with your eyes every day. You watch a match and one team is getting beat. They can't do anything right. And they go into halftime and the coach gives them the pep talk of their life. And they come out and it's like, this is a different team. Are these different players? And now they start doing everything right. They win the match, come from way from behind and win. Well, what changed? What changed is this excellent coach painted a different picture of who they are, how they can play, what they can accomplish. He just painted a picture that got them pumped up, motivated. They believed in it. And now they come out and they're running a different movie in their head. That movie is creating different feelings. And man, their subconscious mind acts immediately to those new feelings. You move differently, you're breathing differently, you're standing up straighter and taller, you got light in your eyes. And the next thing you know, you're winning. And that's exactly how it works for any aspect of your life. Your subconscious mind already knows exactly what you need to do to fix your primary relationship. It knows exactly what you need to become healthy, lean, fit, strong, happy. It already knows that. That's not the problem. It's the all-powerful genie. You have to create the feelings of the life you want and quit feeding your subconscious mind the feelings that match the life you don't want. And yet, that's what we're trained to do. We're absolutely trained to focus on our problems, to give all this power and attention and value to any problem that crops up in our real life, quote unquote, our physical world. But the exact opposite is the way to generate a beautiful, happy life, a good life. That's to seize control of your spirit realm, which is in your imagination, the way you feel about things, your psyche, the movie you're running in your head. To try to change physical realities without first changing spirit realities, your psyche, is ineffectual, but it's what everybody's doing. And that's why you have so many frustrated people. It's like, I worked so hard. Why haven't I figured this out already? But you're focusing on the problem so intensely, and you're just flooding your subconscious mind with the feelings of that problem. And guess what? Nothing is going to change. It's going to keep it that way. It's going to give you more reasons to feel that way. But the second you drastically change how you feel, and of course, you can't look at reality to do that. That's not going to help you. You've got to go to your superpower, your ability to imagine and pretend, and flood your subconscious mind with the feelings that match that, what you want. And then, honestly, I mean, don't take this too literally, but you can sit back and watch as things change in your life. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't going to be a lot of work and effort involved in the change, because, and this is where manifesting coaches do a lot of damage. They have people lying on the couch with their eyes shut as hard as they can, trying to force the physical world to change. It doesn't work that way. You change. You feel different. You run a different movie. You feel differently. You send that to your subconscious mind. Now, what's going to happen is you speak to it in feelings, impulses, ideas, attitudes, and it speaks back to you the exact same way. You're going to get different feelings, different impulses. You might be driving along and out of nowhere you think, well, you know what? I've seen this building. I've seen that sign. I'm going to pull in there and find out what these guys do. And you think, oh, that's kind of crazy and weird, but I'm going to do it. You go in, and the next thing you know, a chain of events starts to unravel where you've got a new business or a new client or who knows what. So in my book, I tell how I went from being a contractor, not making much money, working constantly, to, in about a year's time, is about 8 months of changing the way I spoke to my subconscious mind about finances and career and business. that this incredible opportunity just kind of fell into my lap. But I also tell how that the work that was involved, but the reason you act on your feelings. So it's natural when you get an impulse to talk to a certain person, you call them up. When you get an impulse to say something during that lunch meeting, you act on your feelings. Well, where are those impulses coming from? Your subconscious mind, based on what it believes is supposed to happen. But you told it what's supposed to happen. So you're completely in control of your life, of your future. You can literally dictate future events. Now, I'm going to tell you right here that not all future events that you imagine and pretend happen the way you imagine them, but things that match the feelings you're generating will happen. But sometimes the exact event will happen. So let's take somebody who's a football player, and they imagine, every time they think of football, they imagine themselves just being the star. They make that one-handed catch and then run into the end zone. They score, the crowd goes wild inside their head. And they do that all day long when they think of football. Well, that exact one-handed catch may not happen, but something that matches those feelings will, not just something, things one after another are going to match the feelings that guy generates by seeing himself succeeding at football and doing great. And it's so easy to see how someone who doesn't do that, someone who may want to do well at football, they're on the team, but they worry about how hard practice is going to be tonight, or if they're going to have to run wind sprints, or how long it will go. Well, that guy's feeling entirely differently. And he may even worry about dropping a one-handed pass in front of the cheerleaders. That would be so embarrassing. Well, who's going to do better? It's obvious. The guy that's all pumped up and running a movie in his head of, just success and fun and excitement related to football. He can't wait to get to practice. The other guy's always 10 minutes late, has to run wind sprints just for being late. Anyway, this is basically what's in the book. Now, I wrote that book, and I don't mean to put myself on the level of Sultan Musa of Mali. He was incredibly benevolent. And you can read about him in the history books. National Geographic did a story about him. But he was benevolent. He wanted to share what he had learned, what had made his life so wonderful, with everybody. And about 2 years ago, I had shared more on a one-on-one basis, probably with hundreds of people, all of whom have gone on to experience a way better life. But I was getting ready to retire onto my farm in Belize 2 years ago when it really hit me strongly that I can't do that without sharing what I've been given to a lot more people. A couple hundred wasn't good enough. And I didn't even know anything about online marketing, Facebook ads, podcasts, none of that. But as soon as I started seeing myself getting the message out to thousands of people instead of hundreds, everything fell into place. I met two wonderful partners who handle the marketing, and it just all, it just fell into place. And it sounds like, wait a minute, this is too good to be true. This is too easy. But let me ask, I'll leave you with one kind of parting question. When you think about everything good that came to you, every great idea, did it not just kind of come to you from out there? I mean, half the time, like when you think about maybe you're younger, but you want to be married, you're of that age where you kind of want to find that perfect person, and you just can't. And finally, now this doesn't apply to everybody, but some people will relate to this. Finally, you give up. You're so frustrated with dating, and then you just give up. It's like, God, this is not going to work. I'm just going to be single. And then what happens? Bam, you meet that person. Here's a better example. If you've ever known a couple who wanted to get pregnant, they wanted to have a baby, and they couldn't. It's hard to watch. I've had that too in my family. It was really painful. They want to have a baby, and everyone else has one, and they can't have one. And they just become engrossed in this terrible situation of not being able to get pregnant. And finally, they give up and they decide, we're just going to adopt. We can't have our own biological baby. Fine, we're going to adopt a baby. Now, Adam, I don't know if you know very many people, but what happens more often than not when they give up, they quit, they let go of all that intense emotion, negative emotion. We can't have one. Oh, now we're going to have one, but we're just going to do it a different way. We're going to adopt. What happens? Yeah, 2 out of 2 in my family.
And having
they're pregnant. Yeah, and now they got a baby in their arms and another one coming. You can codify this, and that's what is in the book. It's what I do all day long. I teach people basically to succeed at the game where your quote unquote real life is trying to get you to feel one way, and you want to feel a different way. And you have absolute control over that spirit realm. It's your imagination. You can have it any way you want, fast. But you got to learn this game. You're being bombarded with triggers from this side. You've got to create your own triggers that take you into those beautiful daydreams that match the life you want on this side. And then you have to get good at employing them and dodging these. The physical ones, you got to learn to dodge them. But so I've learned over 28 years, I've developed, I should say, lots of games and techniques and tricks and tips that work for people. And the reason I've created so many is because what works for me may not work for somebody else. You've got to come up with, some people are very musical, some people are very visual, some people, just everybody learns differently and responds differently to different triggers. But over the years, I would say, now knock on simulated wood grain here, because I'm going to say I haven't been stumped for a long, long time. People come to me with what they think is a unique problem. Certainly, Jeff, I can't fix this just by changing the way I feel about it. In fact, there's no way I can feel differently about this, right? I always come up with a spell breaker that blows it out of the water. And the next thing you know, things are changing. Once you do this right, Adam, you can't stop it. You are not tough enough to stop your subconscious mind from orchestrating different situations and circumstances into your life once you flood it with intensely positive, exciting, happy, fun feelings about any aspect of your life. You can't stop it. Things are going to happen. You will act on the feelings and impulses it sends you. And if you don't act on one, when it believes something, it will send another one and another. It will never stop. It is so persistent in getting you to live the role it believes you're supposed to live. And all you have to do is tell it what to believe in the language of the gods, feelings. So the whole trick is, how do you produce those wonderful feelings consistently or relatively consistently? You don't have to do it all the time. And it's okay if you feel bad sometimes, because positive feelings are 1,000 times more powerful than the cheap, easy, negative feelings that the quote unquote real world sends you. So that's the whole trick. I just teach people how to do this in the face of the real world. And they don't need me forever, believe me. I've got people who are off and running and just doing crazy stuff, bigger than I even want to do. I have the life that I love. I'm very happy with what I want. I don't want $100 million. I'm happy with what I've got. But some people do, and off they go.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's basically it, Adam.
Yeah, no, I think it's such an awesome story, and like the story you mentioned with your life, and also the concepts and what you've created, and the story of Sultan and who he was, and like you said, he was working a job concreting, wasn't enjoying it, and like frustrated, and you explained to that lady about you kind of offloaded what was going on, because that's kind of what we do as people. And i I think, like, I can definitely relate to that frustration, because I remember doing a job. I mean, you got to do what you got to do at the end of the day, and there's nothing wrong with doing certain jobs, but if you're not happy, if you're not happy in yourself, then that needs to change and you need to do something else. But I remember doing a job working in a bar and feeling frustrated, having that same frustration, and not knowing what avenue I want to go into, not knowing what to do. And then, what clicked with me is what you mentioned with, the following those good emotions and following what comes, what drives you, if that makes sense, and acting on that. And like you said, having a vision, having an image of being a certain person, or being in a certain position, or living a certain life, you have to follow those emotions, and really believe in yourself and tell yourself you deserve that. And it kind of relates into everything that you said. And you mentioned pretending and living out a life, living a certain way, and attracting that into your life. And it's funny you mentioned like driving, because when you said driving like your granddad. When I took my driving test, I failed twice. I passed on my third time. And my granddad, he's such a steady driver, and I could hear his voice in my head on my lesson. I was like, just drive like my granddad. I ended up passing my test, because in my head I was like, okay, well, just take your time, do what he would do, to play that role, like, so to speak.
Well, that's a funny coincidence that I would pick that example for you. But in a way, when you do this, you start to realize there are no coincidences. Things have been set up to work a certain way. And your subconscious mind and my subconscious mind are absolutely connected. And this is true if you ever walk into a room and there's a guy on the other side of the room. You've never met this guy, right? But you don't like him and he doesn't like you. Well, how can that be? You've never met. You know it on a subconscious level. You're gonna be oil and water if you two get together. However, if you do get together and you start to get to know each other and you start talking about some things and discussing, you could end up very good friends. But in that moment, you don't think so. And the reverse is true. You could walk into a room, someone you've never met in your life, you feel like that's your best friend. You've been friends forever. Well, how do you know? Because we're all connected and we're all communicating with each other, but on a subconscious level, not consciously. So anyway, it's a lot of fun. And I'll tell you this one thing. I tell people that I can teach them how to seize control of their future and their life. But the most important thing is that they can immediately, and I mean immediately, like download the book today, read even the first 3 chapters, and you can take control of your current level of happiness immediately. You will be hopeful, happy, because you'll know, oh my gosh, I am in way more control than I thought I was. And this is how you do it. This is how you seize control. You don't need everything in your life to be perfect. In fact, that's a misnomer. People are waiting for something good to happen in their life so they can finally be happy. The exact opposite is the truth. You have to get happy first, and then good things start happening in your life. So download the book, just get started, play around with speaking the language of the gods. I promise you, it's the most fun and hopeful thing you will ever do. This whole thing is the most fun way to live that I've ever run across in 62 years of being here. It is just a fun way to live. And everything you were scolded for doing as a child, you get to go back. You get to get lost in daydreams. You get to play make-believe. You get to invent and imagine and pretend and play. But you're doing it now as an adult with maturity and purpose and intent. And so it's not just fun, it's profitable, it's productive. It's the most productive thing you can do, as a matter of fact.
No, I love I love what you've created and what you do, and I think it's highly beneficial, and people can really benefit from your book, Seven Sultan Secrets, right?
The Sultan's
So
Seven Secrets.
Sultan
A
Seven
lot of
Secrets.
S's in there.
Yeah, because I think it's all relatable and it's all true, and like you said, we are all connected as human beings, and our subconscious is a very powerful, and being connected with yourself, getting to know yourself, and following that program will really help. And like, where can people find like your book and your social media, your website, that kind of thing?
Well, they can download the book. It's absolutely free. You get the digital version. You can have it immediately at sultans7secrets.com. So Sultans has an S on the end, seven, the number seven, by the way, the number, and then secrets with an S on the end.com. You can download that book immediately. And then we have events I'm doing, workshops I'm putting on, but you're not even invited to any of those until you've read the book and have the basic concepts, so that if you want to, you come to the workshop ready to rock and roll and start doing the seven secrets. Adam, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
No, no, you're most welcome. It's been great, listening to your story and the work that you do, and I think it's great what you're doing, and I'll definitely share what you're doing and put it out there so people can tune in and read your book and maybe download the audiobook as well.
Thank you very much.
You're
Appreciate
most
it.
you're most welcome. Take care.